this is William Tincup and Ryan Leary, and you're listening and watching to Inside the C-Suite. We have a friend of Ryan and I's on today, and he's got a bunch of cool experience that we're going to explore. And so, Terry, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Terrific. Thank you for having me. I'm
Welcome in.
excited to share
100%.
with you.
100%. So, Terry, why don't you introduce yourself and your current C-Suite position?
Sure. Well, I'm the CEO of Daxtra Technologies. Daxtra's been around for about 23 years. They do AI based recruitment automation.
Okay.
I like to say AI is only as good as the data you manage. What's really unique about Daxtra is they started with language processing like 23 years ago.
Wow.
And so they can take resumes and they can take job descriptions and parse them, extract all that data, which makes if you extract, 2 billion resumes a year, you get a lot of data, right? And you can connect the
Yeah.
dots. And so instead of, doing Boolean search, which is how most systems work, they just try to compare keywords to keywords.
Right.
We actually do semantic search and we connect the dots. So if you're looking for, a C++ developer and somebody's resume says .NET development, in a Boolean search, you're not going to connect. But
Right.
in semantic search, we can correlate those two together and then grade, score, and rank candidates based upon the job description. And that's what we do fundamentally. It's manage all that data, address generative AI, and ensure we're progressing our ability to parse and match candidates to job descriptions. And that's super valuable for recruiters, right? Who don't have to
Yeah.
do all that manual work themselves. And then just recently, and I think, William, you're probably aware of this, we acquired Pivot CX, which is an
Yeah.
engagement platform.
Right.
And that's a really critical next step because we provide to recruiters the ability to quickly take all the data, what's in their ATS, what comes in from job boards, what's even in their email boxes, and grade, score, and rank candidates. And then we
Right.
kind of stop there and we're like, here's the best candidates.
Right.
Go talk to them, right? And now with Pivot CX, we can engage those candidates quickly. We have a one-to-many approach for recruiters. And one thing I learned from prior history, and I had acquired a company called Wade and Wendy once upon a time, and it's kind of a chatbot, contextualized chatbot.
Hmm.
Right.
We used chatbots in candidate engagement a lot, and candidates know when they're talking to a chatbot.
Right.
Yeah.
When you have the most qualified candidates, they want to talk to a human. And the recruiters, when they know they're talking to the most qualified candidate, they want to humanize the discussion and get them quickly to a hiring manager and just get them through the hiring process.
Right.
So the Pivot CX platforms helps us do that. It has very high conversion rates, very quick engagement rates. Most people will engage within 20 to 30 seconds from engagement. And so that enables us to not waste a lot of time and effort on chatbots that are good contextualization, but people realize
Right.
they're really talking to a human and they want to get through that process and humanize it.
So I don't know about you, William, but I am thoroughly confused now because I wanted to learn all about your history, Terry, but you've opened up cans of worms in my
Oh
head
yeah. No.
around recruiting and automation and Wade and Wendy. What is that? Was that the first
It's one of the
tool to
first,
have a
not the
name, a
first.
persona in the space?
No, I think actually the first one was acquired by Alexander Mann and it was called Karen, which is probably the
Okay.
worst
You
name
don't
to
want
have
Karen.
given.
Yeah.
Bad
You
idea.
don't want to talk to Karen,
No, what the
Yeah.
right?
Chad and Karen. Not a good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah,
Bad
yeah,
idea.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's gosh, there's so much there to unpack. We need to have a different show for that, but we'll stick to the script here to learn about your journey, which is obviously pretty in depth. So we should probably get started. Where do you want to kick off, William? Go back to
I'd go back to what did you
15?
yeah, 15-year-old Terry, what did you want to be when you grew up, quote unquote?
Well, I had my dad was a pharmacist, and I had a couple brothers that went to medical college. So I
Okay.
figured I'd follow in their footsteps. So I did 2 years of pre med, and
Mm,
got to the point where it's like when I had to cut into a dead body,
yep,
yeah, I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
this
I'm done.
this I'm,
it's
this is
usually
not going to work.
it's usually organic chemistry that weeds people out.
I
They
got through the organic chemistry,
yeah,
but it was
cadavers, no
cadavers
cadavers.
that turned me
That's
off.
fair.
So
And
I
so
I
you
went
pivoted.
into yeah, I pivoted and I went into information systems.
Yep.
And back then I hate to say this, we were still doing card decks and
Oh yeah.
COBOL programming with card
Hmm.
decks. And so it was the very early stages of IT, and the internet came out
Right.
about when I graduated, and that was a fun time to be innovating and to be doing unique things. So I started my first job was as a product manager, and it was for a company called Megatech, and there was a software division called Template Graphics Software. And I started working for them and doing training and product management engagement. And then I got a bad review from a manager
What
who
made it?
wanted,
Wait a minute. What made
who,
it bad?
He's
What made
he's
it
trying to
bad?
skip over this. You got to go
No,
back.
you go. No,
Yeah.
no. Stop down. What made it
but
bad?
there's a fun ending to this story.
Okay.
But I got a bad review. It was my first review, and it turned out I escalated this within the organization. It wasn't that big a company. I found out her motivation was to keep me and not allow me to go
Bad
and
manager. Yep.
yeah, go
Mm.
to another manager. And so she was going to mentor me on my bad traits. So I left
Mm,
the company and I went to a competitor. And it turned out there was a competitor called ISCO down the street. Worked for them for a few years. They got acquired by Computer Associates.
yep.
I became
CA.
it was funny at Computer Associates, the day they acquired us, they did a lot of acquisitions and they just cut out top management.
Right.
So here I am, a product manager. I walk in the door, and they had two doors for people that were staying, and another door for people that were leaving. And I didn't know which door I was going into. So, but I met the CEO of Computer Associates, and he's like, "You're now in charge of this product. What do you want to do?" And so, well, let's integrate it into the rest of your platform. And so he said, "Great,
Battlefield promotion. Go.
come to New York, and we'll get that done." And so I did that. It was a great experience. Computer Associates was a unique company, but I learned a lot. And then Template Graphics Software, it turns out, got spun out to a private equity company, and their CEO resigned, and they hired me at the age of 30 as the CEO for Template Graphics because their larger
Wow.
competitor, ISCO and Computer Associates, I'd done some good work for. And guess who was one of my direct reports?
The
The
person that gave you
manager
a
of
bad
the bad
reward.
review.
The editor of the bad review.
Did you get
So
to mentor her?
I got to mentor her. That's right. And so that turned out very well. She's a great gal, and she just she was looking to build her
Yeah.
own department,
Yeah.
and
Right.
so we ended up doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting it turned out that way because I mean, we've had a number of conversations where it's just been almost give without expectations, right? Around your
Mhm.
employees and not holding people back, and here's the opposite,
Hmm.
right? Holding you
Right.
back, and yeah, that's a good story.
Well, the thing is it would have been a different. It would have been a different path
Yeah.
had she maybe not given you that bad review, right? You
Yeah.
might not have escalated it. You might have just stayed there a little bit longer, and all these other things don't play out.
Yeah.
So,
So it was meant to happen, and
yeah,
I give her credit to this day.
yeah.
And as a 30-year-old CEO, I learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm
Tell us
sure.
about that.
Well, Template Graphics was interesting in that we had licensed OpenGL from a company called Silicon Graphics. Remember Silicon
Oh,
Graphics?
I
Yeah.
100%.
And we created a software development toolkit that operated on top of it that ran across multiple platforms.
Right.
And there was an initiative to create a industry standard called VRML, Virtual Reality Modeling Language.
Right.
and we commercialized VRML. Today, it's known as X3D. It's actually an ISO certified 3D graphic standard. But the
Right.
early days, it was VRML. And so I went to Microsoft, I went to Netscape, knocked on doors, and got them to bundle VRML in their platform. I remember going to Microsoft, and I went, by myself. Template was still a fairly small company, and I sat down in a conference room with probably 20 people in the room and a very senior, vice president of product. And I pitched the product, and people asked questions, and they began to talk about, well, who else does this? And we got into this very long discussion. And the manager, who hadn't said a word the whole time, stops the discussion and says, "Hey, can I ask you guys a question? Has anybody else come to Bellevue to pitch this kind of product?" And they're like, "No." "Then why aren't we doing a deal with Terry? Let's do a deal with Terry." I was like,
Done.
"Done." So we created an industry standard, and it helped drive adoption of our um, open inventor platform that we created across multiple systems: Sun Microsystems, Silicon Graphics, DEC
Right.
in the day. You remember those guys. And eventually, that company got sold for about $19 million.
Success.
So yeah, it got sold to Mercury Computer Systems,
Yep.
and it was a good outcome.
And
So that was my first
that was PE
real,
backed, right? So the PE firm, were they
yeah.
okay? Have
It
you had
was,
any other exchanges with those PE folks?
for sure, they were happy with the outcome. They were
Yes, hundred
pretty happy
percent.
with the outcome, and that led me to just doing more innovation stuff. And once I had that experience,
Right.
um, to having sold a company, it gave me the desire to start my own company. So right after that, I started a company called Advanced Recruiting Technology, and this is when news groups were just coming out.
Right.
And so we built some bots. I actually had a angel investor who was from Qualcomm, and he was on the CDMA um, license. Helped develop CDMA as a cell technology for Qualcomm. And this guy was into AI, and it was my first real progression into AI. And we built some bots that would go onto news groups, capture information, and turn that into a recruiting process.
Right.
And about 6 months in, I got a cease and desist letter from Craig Newmark. And he's like, "Get your bots off of Craigslist. They're not allowed." And we
Dude,
had to take that down.
frame
But
that letter. That's
Yeah.
yeah,
awesome.
Well,
oh, I
that's when
do
you know you've done something well.
100%.
I do have that framed, and it took Craig maybe 10 to 15 years to re-engage with me.
Right.
And I asked him if he remembered that. And he's like, "Oh, dude, I sent so many of those
Yeah.
letters out. I don't remember." But at Panda Logic, we were doing quite a bit of revenue with Craig and
Yeah.
helping
Oh.
advertise
Hmm.
job listings on their site.
Right.
And so he smiled and just kind of congratulated me for having gone through that
Dude, you
process.
gotta get that
Yeah.
autographed. I have a cease and desist to me, my name, company, blah blah blah, and from Mark Benioff, and I have it
Oh
framed,
wow!
and
Oh
it is on my bucket list to meet him at some point place and get him to sign it, get him to autograph it.
well, that would be good. That would be very good.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice,
yeah.
nice.
Oh, that's
It
genius.
still
So
today, it amazes me. Craigslist though, the site
Oh
is
yeah,
the
no,
same.
it's
It is
genius.
exactly the same.
That's the
yeah,
beauty. That's
it
well,
hadn't
so is
changed
Google
a whole lot,
search.
but they've
Yeah,
monetized the hell out of it, and they've
they
Yes,
done
they
it.
have.
sure have.
So, and career placement is still a component of what they do.
Yeah.
That's right.
They
Hmm.
That's right.
do it pretty well. So, anyways, that was a company called Advanced Recruiting Technologies. We started this. We got one major client in the healthcare space. We actually got nominated that year and won an award for HR Executive Magazine Product of the Year, put us on the roadmap. And in 18 months from start, we sold that to hire.com for 18 million. So that
That's
was
fantastic.
18 months, $18 million outcome. And that gave me some real validation that
Right.
startups, even if, I've heard people say startups are like building an airplane after you jump off the cliff, right? You're building it and you hopefully you get it designed to where it's flying before you hit the ground.
Anybody have
Yeah.
an Allen wrench?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit what it's like. And actually, hire.com sold to Authority. I was their
That's
corp
right.
dev person for a number of years.
As Bucky Couch was there at
Bucky
some point.
Couch was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bucky
Yeah,
was a
good. That
founder.
was that was a good crew. And then it eventually went to People Fluent or whatever.
Exactly.
It eventually landed. But all the people in product, Bucky,
Mhm.
that was a real. I mean, they were way ahead of their time.
Yep.
That was a good crew. That was actually a really good team.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned a lot actually from that team. And
Yeah.
Austin Ventures was a great partner. We had a
Yeah.
really strong advisory council. In fact, that advisory council actually came into play for me later on down the road at PandaLogic. But one thing I did with them is when they sold, there was a job board business that actually Hearst, we were powering a lot of the Hearst properties. And
Right.
we spun that out and I took that to a DCO and worked with a DCO in building out CareerCast and their job board platform for a few years. And then decided to go back and do another startup. And that was called Real Match. It was with an Israeli founder. And the Israelis, super smart. Their R&D team was
Oh
phenomenal.
yeah.
And they would get one client in the US,
Yeah.
validate the product. It was a small little client, newspaper client in Cleveland, Ohio, and that was their one client. And then they would go out and look for a management team that could build a company around that.
Right.
And so I jumped at that, moved to New York, and 10 years later we pivoted. Well, we pivoted about 8 years um, from there, and what we had developed was really good performance data on jobs. So we were powering the New York Times, we were powering all kinds of private label job boards, and we would take a
Right.
job posting on the New York Times and send it out to all of the 200 400 different job boards and promote that as kind of a programmatic ad unit,
Right.
right? So you place your job in the New York Times and it would get promoted across the internet
Right.
and drive traffic back. So we had all of this job performance data, and we started to see a bunch of programmatic vendors hit the market. Recruitix was out there, and
Right.
Appcast was out there,
Right.
and they had a rules-based system. So they had literally had a campaign manager would write a rule, guess at what's the
Right.
cost to place this ad, where should we place this ad, and then they would run the rules and see what kind of output they'd got, and then they'd go back and change the rules. So we looked at that and decided we have all this performance data. We don't need rules. We'll just have it algorithmically defined and we'll predict in advance.
Right.
Give us your jobs. We'll look at the job performance across job boards and we will
Here's
tell
what your
you,
budget should be.
Right.
yeah, optimal spend and optimal
Placement.
candidate
Yeah.
flow.
And
Yeah.
nobody
And
was doing this at the time, so
yeah,
this was new.
yeah, this is the first AI approach to automation of programmatic
Right.
And
job.
that was a real match, which became PandaLogic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, COVID hit, right? So
Right.
we were in the middle of COVID and we did a little bit of research. And in North America, there were 44 companies that were hiring during COVID. That's it.
44, that's it?
That's it.
Oh,
44
wow.
out of the Fortune 500,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
Amazon's on that
they
list.
were all healthcare companies and logistics companies.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Walmart got big, Amazon got big,
Right.
healthcare companies got big. I remember there was Trump had a presser with a bunch of healthcare companies, and I was looking at each one, and each one of them we had targeted and had done some programmatic job advertising for them. So, healthcare, finding right nurses who would go into an ICU or COVID, therapy group
Yeah.
were hard to find.
Right.
And so that's when the notion of travel nurses really blew up. And people would fly to go to different hospitals, and we were able to find those candidates. And so we went from 18 million to 160 million in 2 years
Wow.
Wow.
Over
because
COVID.
because we targeted
Y-
those
Yeah.
44
Right.
companies.
Right. Right. Of course.
And the biggest was probably Amazon. And Amazon, we helped workforce staffing, find um, workers for not only delivery drivers, some of their retail outlets, and for their obviously their placement centers, right, and fulfillment
Right.
centers.
Right.
So we, in 2 years' time, hired, and they paid us. We had a unique model. They paid us on a day one start.
Right.
So they didn't want to go, to have us serve up a candidate and then find a background check and to get disqualified or, get ghosted at the fulfillment
Right.
center. They wanted to pay for somebody that was going to get badged that day, show up and start work. And so we took that model because we felt confident that the people we were directing, the candidates we were directing, were qualified for those kind of jobs. That's one of the benefits of programmatic. You can target that particular kind of
Right.
audience. So we placed 700,000 workers at Amazon in less than 2 years.
Holy cow.
My
That is
And
goodness.
massive.
well, that tells you what the turnover is at
Yeah.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because
Yeah.
people would take a job and
And
work
boom,
for a
gone. Yeah.
month and go somewhere else, and
Right.
um, so yeah, it was quite a run. And the end of that, we decided because we had some private equity partners. We had the largest private equity firm in Israel funding
Hmm.
us. We had some venture companies in the U.S. Edison Partners,
Yep.
as in Thomas Alva Edison.
Yep.
Um, Kind of a cool place to go and raise money at to see all the work that he did and to have them invest in Real Match and PandaLogic. So there was in anticipation once we grew to that extent, we would get an
Right.
Right.
exit
Right.
because we had investors that had been 10
Well,
years with
and
us.
you'd earned it. I
Right.
mean, to some degree. Yeah.
But
So that's
I got to give these investors credit because we came to them 8 years in, which is typically 3 years after, they want to
right.
see an exit. And we
Right.
said, we need to pivot and we're going to go into programmatic. And they helped us do that. And they doubled down on the investment. And I think we had, for them as well as for the market, an attractive, unique value proposition that was
Yep.
innovative that they were willing to back.
Right.
So after that, we sold to a public company called Veritone, and I spent a little time on building out an earnout. It was kind of funny. We went through a 12-month sales process, and during COVID, it was not easy
Right.
to find companies that were willing to invest
Sure.
because COVID was so unique. The big question was: is this employment market that you've attracted, that you've fulfilled, is it going to remain steady? And I remember one PE firm hired the Boston Consulting Group to come in and look at and analyze our business, and they've pretty much said Amazon is in 2 years workforce staffing and their fulfillment centers is going to be 100% robotic, and there will be no talent there. And we were like, no, I don't think that's going to
Yeah.
transition that fast.
Two by two.
Yeah,
Great.
but and robotics is having an impact, but it's
100%.
still a very labor intensive marketplace. And
Yes.
so they were trying to drive down the value, and so we didn't go with that PE firm, but we found a
Yeah.
strategic company that was AI enabled. And what was cool about Veritone had an AI OS platform,
Right.
but people don't buy operating systems based upon the operating system. I mean, if you bought Apple, you did so because you got Apple devices, or if you bought Microsoft, it's because you wanted PowerPoint and Outlook, and you wanted that
Android.
app,
Android the same way. Yeah.
right? And the OS comes along and supports it. So they recognized they needed AI based applications to really pull through the AI OS platform, which is
Right.
what Apple did and what Microsoft did. And so we were one of those AI based applications that could demonstrate uniqueness of application of AI and tie it to their platform.
Right. So, Terry, I got to ask. So, usually, people that we speak with, they have a motivation to be an entrepreneur. Or they have some entrepreneurial spirit when they were 7 years
Right.
old, things like that.
Right.
I could be wrong, but I'm sensing you are attracted to the chess match here of putting pieces together, building, selling, and moving things around to make them work. Maybe talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think innovation is unique. And like at Template Graphics, we created this VRML and monetized that platform.
Yeah.
With PandaLogic, we enabled AI and job advertising. And so innovation is important, but I say that innovation without a team
Yeah.
doesn't get to market. And
Right.
so
Hmm.
one of the things I valued at all of my experiences, whether it was even small startup like Advanced Recruiting Technology and the Hire.com transaction, the team that you build and
Yep.
the team that you support is the team that's going to get you there.
Right.
And at PandaLogic, when we sat back and we did this pivot and then COVID hit and we were like, oh my God, people, TAs being laid off everywhere. How are we gonna succeed in this market?
Mhm.
It was a team approach. Everybody got behind the strategy and we went out and implemented. And if we hadn't done that as a team from an individual standpoint, I couldn't have made it happen by myself.
Right.
Well,
And
you to that point, Ryan and I we did some work with y'all around that time, and
Yeah.
you had Jason Putnam in sales, Jen Ravelli in marketing. I mean, you had all stars. These are
we
people
had
that are all
They've gone on to
stars,
do more great things. Yeah.
100%.
exactly. Yeah, Jen, Jason have all done amazing things in their career, and they
Yeah.
were part of that effort. And yeah, if I have a mode of leadership operation. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called servant leadership, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you kind of flip the triangle upside down, where the traditional triangle, everybody reports up to the CEO, and the CEO decides what to do. If you flip that and you say, I'm going to make the people that report to me successful, how can I help you succeed? Changes the nature of the game. And if you empower them, and Jen was a game changer for us in terms of marketing.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, we had quite a few people who came in and we just enabled them to succeed within our model and they made it happen.
You're one of the few CEOs that I know, multiple exits, so I know a lot of those types of folks. But you've done it with PEs. Most of the people that I know that have had exits that have done PEs have had kind of either a bad taste in their mouth or they just didn't understand the game that was being played, etc. But
Yeah,
you've been able to do it with multiple PEs. So, what's the advice to folks that are going to interact with PEs? It's different than VCs. It's different than angel or early stage investors, etc. So, like,
right.
what's the secret? I guess
Well,
to
I learned a lot. The first PE was actually with Template Graphics software. They had spun this thing out. They deferred quite a bit to us. They were a very small PE firm, and so we made some good decisions. We made some bad decisions. They stuck through us, and we got an exit.
right.
With Viola, who was the largest PE firm in Israel, they were more hands-on but fully supportive. And the PE firm I'm working with now, actually, after the sale of PandaLogic to Veritone, I was looking to, spend a little time on the beach and maybe do some fractional work for private equity firms.
I remember this period because I think you and I talked during this period.
Yeah. And
Like I
so,
think I'm not quite retired, but I'm,
Yeah.
just kind of taking it easy. I'm like, uh-huh,
So
yep,
yeah,
you never spent time on the beach. You never
good.
retired.
You did a
I,
couple months.
I did for a couple
Yeah,
months. I
you
got
did a
some
couple
sand
months.
between my toes and I got bored a little bit.
Hmm.
And so Stratum Capital actually
Yep.
approached me. And when I looked at Daxtra, I was just too enthralled with the opportunity to scale this organization. They have so much data. And in the application of AI for automation and recruiters, it's all about the data.
Now
And
I
if you
might
have good data, you get great outcomes. If you have bad data, you get bad
Yeah,
outcomes.
yeah,
I
bad
might
outcomes.
remember this incorrectly, so please, Terry, correct me. Didn't they hire you to take a look at it? Not thinking of you of running it, but more, hey, suss out this deal. Tell us where the bugs are, or the ticks are on this particular dog. And then once you got into it, you're like, yeah, I want to take this to market or
Yeah,
something
exactly.
like that.
And
That
what Stratum does unique, and you asked about private equity firms, and they're not a huge one. They've got about 1 billion under management and
right,
a small portfolio size. And what they focus on is transitions of founders with SaaS-based
right,
companies.
right.
And that's a unique thing because
Smart.
when you have founders who have built a company and they've got it to a particular point, it's their baby
That's
and
right.
they want their baby to succeed. They don't want to hand it off to somebody who's going to provide
Right.
a rough ride for that baby. And so they developed this thing called a 5 point plan. And I looked at their 5 point plan and I wanted to basically, I wanted to validate it. And so I took their 5 point plan, talked to their founders, and before they do a deal, before they actually put the money in, they get agreement with the founders on what are the 5 things we're going to do, what's the 5 things we're not going to do, right? And get assurance from
Hmm.
these guys that this is the right approach to scaling the business. And so I went in and validated their 5 point plan, and it was spot on. And I was amazed that a PE company could come in, look at this technology, look at the direction, and say, here's the 5 things we're going to do to help it to scale. And so my focus in the last, it's been what, 8 or 9 months, has been implementing that 5 point plan. We've built a new management team. We've two of the three founders we've given leeway to go out in the market and do their own thing.
Yeah,
One
of
of the
course.
founders is super smart and super engaged and very helpful, and so we've engaged him. But we've hired a new CTO, new CFO, new VP of marketing. So we basically built a new management team.
Right.
All of that was defined by Stratum Capital as the going forward plan.
Yes. When that happens, how does that change the actual company itself? So
Mm,
Daxter is a startup.
Mhm.
They're at a point, and everybody knows it's time, right? It's time. We
Right.
want to scale. It's time to make a move. This is what we need to
Right.
do. How do you worry about? Do you care about keeping what Daxter is to what Daxter was yesterday as you go
yeah.
forward, or are you just
Yeah.
there to make that
Yeah.
change?
And sometimes when you come in and say, we got to scale, 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 we got to grow, 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 and we're going to do this and this and that, you
Right.
don't necessarily have the people that were
Right.
oriented to do that.
Right.
And so we went through I hired a consultant. We went through a company life cycle analysis, and we came up with a position in a life cycle that most people didn't think they were in.
Right.
But we validated and
Hmm.
basically came up with a theme that we're going to get better before we get bigger. And here's how we're going to get better. We're going to
Love that.
change, some of the processes that we had internally. There had been a lack of investment in certain things because it was somewhat of a lifestyle company. Now, it
Right.
performed well. It was highly profitable
Yeah.
because the founders were, taking money out of the company and generating
Right.
great results, but
Right.
they weren't reinvesting to scale.
That's
So,
right.
in order to reinvest, we had to fix some things first, and so we've been selling this theme of better before bigger.
Hmm.
And when we fix some of the things, if you try to scale on a platform that is broken, it's just going to be painful.
Right.
That's right.
And
Right.
so we
Eventually it breaks because
yeah,
it's the foundation or the concrete or whatever the
yeah,
Right.
metaphor you want to use. Yeah.
it can't take the load that you're going to put on it when you need to scale. So
Right.
that's the mode we've been in, and we've been building that in place and we're still growing in a very difficult market. We're still
Right,
growing
right.
and still profitable, but reinvesting some of those profits into the things that we need to have accomplished in order to scale.
So, Terry, you at least as I understand it, you've never acquired a company. You've been acquired and sold, but have you ever acquired during that process?
Oh,
Have you
sure.
ever?
I've
You have?
acquired lots. I mentioned
Oh,
Wade and
Wade
Wind.
and Wendy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
Um,
So,
I
s-
acquired E&S company, a template graphic software back in the day. Silicon
okay,
Graphics had licensed two vendors in the marketplace of the OpenGL technology. One was a hardware company. We went and acquired that license back. Um, we at Actually, one of the last things I did for Veritone was the acquisition of Broadbean
oh
Okay.
wow,
and
smart.
brought on Broadbean. Now Broadbean is been around a long time.
Yep.
Multi-closed. Yeah.
Was kind of suffering under the career builder model.
Did you say
Uh,
kinda?
yeah, kind of suffering
He's being
under
nice.
the
Wow. Okay. Yep. Fair.
but they had a
Kinda.
lot of people, just a ton of jobs being posted through their platform. And the
Right.
whole idea
Very
was,
popular.
well, what if you turn that into programmatic, right?
Right.
And
Right.
instead of saying, I'm going to post this job to Indeed and this job to ZipRecruiter and this job to LinkedIn, let the system decide as opposed to the recruiter and get you better outcomes and lower cost advertising. And so that's the transition they're going through today, which is exciting.
So the acquisition question was about this new acquisition. You've been through this process.
Mm-hmm.
You're acquiring a young company of sorts. So what's the process to pull them through, see the vision, see the kind of greater, what you're trying to achieve,
Yeah.
and not just with tech, but also with the team and all that stuff. What's kind of the way that you go about that?
Yeah. So at PandaLogic, we had an earnout, and that
Right.
earnout caused us to, from a liability standpoint, to be independent. So we operated independently for 18 months,
Wow.
which made it very difficult because
Yeah.
there are certain things they couldn't do in terms of
That's right.
engaging with our team and vice versa.
Because they were public.
Because they were public and there was a earnout,
Got
and
it.
if they integrated us and we didn't hit our earnout, there was a liability. And so
Right.
the day we earned that earnout, we did integration.
Right.
For Pivot CX, integration was from day one.
Right.
So the key is enabling their team to see what we do and enabling our team to see what they do and to fully integrate these products, because these products are tied into the application workflow, right? So it's got to be a seamless approach to go from candidate ranking to candidate engagement. And so we're integrating those teams and the platforms and the products. And from day one, that was the emphasis and the effort. And we're fortunate in that it is a fairly small team. And so we're able
Right.
to
Right.
do that pretty quickly and pretty effectively.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about your journey, all the great stuff you're doing and will do, but we haven't spoken about who you turn to for help.
Oh.
So I'm sure you served as a mentor to a lot of people, but in your career, how have you chosen mentors and or do you rely on mentors even today?
First of all, he's going to say his wife.
I thought he was going to say William, but that's
No.
just me.
No.
Well, I learned at Hire.com in advice. Well, frankly, my wife and my team here have
Right.
been instrumental in my career.
Got it.
And I got married young, had kids right away, did a 5-year MBA program while I was traveling on the road with two kids at home, and it was just a lot of work.
Right.
And without the support that I enjoyed at home, it would have never happened.
Right.
So that it starts there. Um, but then I learned at Hire.com, they had a very engaged and interactive advisory board. And these are people that are in the marketplace that can share with you things you wouldn't otherwise know about how things operate.
Right.
And it helps you to figure things out, helps you to figure out what kind of innovation can we bring given the way in which these companies operate. I remember at Panda Logic one time, well, I went to HR Tech, and there were probably 200 exhibitors, and 170 of them had announcements on AI.
Right.
Remember when AI hit the marketplace? Everybody was talking about AI,
Yeah.
and there was a TA organization that started to look at this and say, okay, we got to understand what this is. The liabilities on the employers. Let's figure this out. And they created a process, and they invited every company that did an announcement at HR Tech to come and go through. Actually, hired University of Pennsylvania to run a tech process to validate the AI. Guess how many of those companies they sent invites to participated?
Two.
Yeah, it was more. It was like eight.
Close.
Eight, eight out of the 170 or so.
Yeah, yeah.
Jesus.
And there were three badges that were achieved. Two were by Panda Logic. Um, they badged the technology based upon the use of algorithms, the use of AI, and the validation of AI. And we get that really helped us go to market. And again, we learned from going through that process. To your
Right.
point, Ryan, about who do you learn from, who
Hmm.
mentors you. We learned from some young students at
Yep.
University of Pennsylvania or Wharton School that here's how AI needs to be validated, right? And so,
And it needs to be
Yeah.
constantly validated.
yeah,
Constant.
And that's you're dealing with ethical AI, but also
yeah,
dealing with audited AI, and having a common understanding of, okay, what is and isn't AI, which
yeah,
in our market, especially back then, is a lot of this stuff was just machine learning that
yeah,
was called AI, or NLP that was called AI. And so
right,
someone actually having some standards
yeah.
helps everybody. So I can
And now you've got laws on the books like AEDT in New York and others where you've got it now to
right,
eliminate that liability and presumption that you're introducing bias to an employer. You've got to go through that process and validate it. So
Right.
we're well accustomed to that, but we did that 5 years ago when AI was just
right.
beginning. So we've learned a lot by virtue of that.
Last question from me. At this particular juncture in your career, do you hire for potential or do you hire based on their experiences?
I we
It's an
do
either
both.
or.
We do
Okay.
both,
It's an either
and
or.
I'll share with you how we do both. For
He's
critical
gonna he's
roles like
gonna he's gonna be a politician here. You know
He's
this.
going to
yeah,
win. He's going to win. He's going to wear me down. I know what's going on here.
we we do for both. And for critical roles like sales, you want to have somebody who's gone through the sales process. They have a sales methodology. They're
Right.
proven. They can
Yes.
engage with clients. It's very important that
Right.
you
That's
have
critical.
validation of that. For our R&D team, we have most of those people in Edinburgh, Scotland, and there's a university there. And the university, actually, Amazon has a tech center in Edinburgh as well. And they
Right.
hire a lot from these university, and they hire for potential. And so we
Hmm.
have quite a few people that are coming right out of university that go into our tech support system. They learn the platform, and then we love to see the internal mobility from these people. Are they going into research? Are they going into generative AI language, large language development? Are they going into algorithmic approaches? Where do they see the benefit of building their career? And so we start with early
Yeah.
stage people with high potential and see them succeed.
Quick question
Did I
on.
answer that question on both sides equally?
I saw what you did there. I appreciate it. No, no, you
So,
did well.
Terry, final question on me, and I want to piggyback off of this as you were talking. It triggered a thought in my head here. For the positions that you're hiring for potential,
Yeah,
these are we've seen some common themes here for throughout their conversations. For those positions that you're hiring for potential, what is their background? What degrees are they coming out with? What did they study at university?
Oh, that's
Well,
interesting.
they typically, go through a traditional tech software development
Hard
process.
science.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Ryan's got a new kick where he's thinking about liberal arts majors
The
and
humanities and yeah,
Well,
humanities.
I think AI is going to change that. I
Yeah.
was at
critical
Unleashed,
thinking.
and there was a keynote speaker at Unleashed, and he's like, "There's going to be four jobs that aren't impacted by AI: professional dancers, professional athletes, right, um, and ditch diggers,
Yep.
Mm.
and people that put roofs on houses. And even
Right.
that one, he said, may be
Could be,
supplanted by
yeah.
AI at some point in time.
Right.
So everything's going to get impacted by AI. And if
Yeah.
you go through, you look at what generative AI is doing in terms of code development today. It makes DevOps almost more important than software development,
Agreed.
right?
Right.
And how you deploy this. And so I think people are beginning to look at the impact of AI. I have a son who's in law school, and Chat GPT passed the LSAT test, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so it can generate legal forms pretty darn well. What do you need a lawyer to craft these forms? No, generative AI can do that for you, but you need a lawyer to guide the process and deal with humans, right, that
Right.
are
Right.
affected by this. And so it's going to change the nature of the work that we do,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's going to change the basis under which you were educated, right? You don't need to know how to write code necessarily. You
Nope.
need to know how to deploy it in a cloud-based environment and make sure that it works and ensure that you've got MVP and beta and the adoption of product by clients and the clients are satisfied with this, but the actual development of it could be AI enabled, right?
Drops mic, walks off stage. Terry Baker, thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
Thank you for your wisdom. This has been absolutely way beyond what we were expecting. So just thank you so much for your wisdom.
Well, I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you. Really
Vice
appreciate it.
versa.